we human beings are both fascinated and frightened about the future. We are fascinated with it, that is hard to deny. Have you kept track as you have driven down the street in your town of the latest fortune teller, the latest palm reader, the latest psychic? For a little bit of money, just come in and we'll give you a glimpse of your future. We're fascinated by the future. Or what about this last year as the year wound to its conclusion? As you went through the supermarket checkout line and your eye glanced over to, what do they call those things, magazines? Did you read on the cover what they had to say? Predictions for 2011. And there you could have it for $1, $2, $3, whatever they cost. You could have it. You could read about the events that would come in 2011. We are fascinated by the future. Along those veins, I thought I might share with you a few of the predictions, just 6 or 7 of them, that have been made over the years, not just over recent years, but over the centuries. I start with this one. The Roman engineer Julius Sextus Frontinus, AD 100, made this pronouncement: inventions have long since reached their limit, and I see no hope of further developments. So there you have it, from AD 100 on, no further developments. Or what about John Erik Erikson, surgeon to Queen Victoria? Those of you who have the letters MD after your name may want to pay especially close attention to this prediction. 1873, he said, the abdomen, the chest, and the brain will be forever shut out from the intrusion of the wise and humane surgeon. What do you do with that? And not to leave anyone out, we now turn to the journalist Junius Henry Brown, who in 1893 said, law will be simplified in the future. How do you like that? Law will be simplified in the future, but he wasn't done yet. He said, lawyers will have diminished, that is, in their numbers, will have diminished, and their fees will have been vastly curtailed. It's true, 1893, it must be true now. That was the prediction. Or what about this? Secretary of State John Foster Dulles, 1954, the Japanese don't make anything that the people in the U.S. would want to buy. How could you be more wrong? 1959, Arthur Somerville, the U.S. Postmaster General, said, before man reaches the moon, your mail will be delivered within hours from New York to Australia by guided missiles. We stand on the threshold of rocket mail. Can you imagine? Now, I don't know, maybe he was envisioning something called the internet. But be careful, because Bob Metcalf, professor of electrical engineering at University of Texas at Austin and co-inventor of Ethernet, in 1995 said this regarding the internet. He said, I predict the internet will go spectacularly supernova and in 1996 will catastrophically collapse. We're fascinated by the future. We want to know what's up there. We want to understand it, be able to predict it. We're fascinated by it, but I can't help but wonder if the fact that our fascination and our predictions are so often wrong doesn't also feed the fact that we are frightened of the future. We have great fears about the future, especially if we come to a point in time where our future seems to be diminishing or is somehow compromised. We're fearful about our own futures, about the future of the economy, the state, the country, the very globe itself. But bound up within all that, we often think about our own future. How much more time is there in our future? Most of us know that at some point in time we cross the 50-yard line. We are further from that goal line from which we began than we are from that goal line from which we will end. And we wonder, how far is it? How much future is there left? Jean Calmet, apparently the longest lived woman in modern times, lived to be 122 and a half years of age. There are others who claim to have lived longer, but researchers say this is the name on which we have landed as having been the longest lived, because we can prove this much more clearly than we can the others who claim the same thing. 122 and a half years old. On her 120th birthday, Somebody asked Miss Cal May, would you give us your vision of the future? And Cal May said, very brief. That's it, just very brief. When you're 120, you can say that. There's not much left. And by the way, along those lines of coming to terms with the fact that your future may not go on forever, John Fetterwood, rector of Grace Episcopal Church in Madison, Wisconsin, writes of the woman in his congregation who went to her rest. She was a single woman. They tried to respect her wishes. They read her wishes, and here is what they read in them. She said, at my services, I want no male pallbearers. None. She said, they wouldn't take me out while I was alive. I don't want them taking me out when I'm dead. The future. It fascinates us and it frightens us. What about our future? We have a planet that seems about ready either to explode or to implode. We're not sure which. We face uncertain economic conditions. Many of us are in situations where jobs or families or friendships or marriages or who knows what else are on the brink of ending. And so we have fears for the future. What is it like to face not having a future? I met a young man who knew that. 17 years old. His name was Terry. I met Terry on the medical oncology unit of the medical center just a few paces away from where we sit this morning. I walked into Terry's room. I was the chaplain, began a conversation with Terry. Quickly became obvious that he was a typical 17-year-old. He didn't want to talk about things religious. What did you say, chaplain? What? I don't know what that is. What is a chaplain? He didn't know. When he found out, he wasn't interested. But I kept coming back to talk to Terry. Terry and I talked about many things. We talked about video games, which were just beginning to make their appearance at that time. We talked about sports. Sports were big in Terry's life. But anytime the conversation even began to turn toward God, he immediately shut the door. Don't want to go there, not interested. But I just kept coming back. And we kept talking and kept visiting. Time came when the news for Terry got increasingly worse. Leukemia was what he had. That was the diagnosis. The news slowly but surely worsened. It was at one of those points when the news got particularly worse that day that in talking to Terry, he, at the end of our conversation, said to me something like this. He said, well, now, why don't you, what is it you do? Why don't you say a prayer for me if you would? It was halting, uncertain. Why don't you say a prayer? And so we prayed. After that, every time I visited Terry, at the end he would say, please, would you just say a prayer before you go? I can still remember the day that I was eating lunch in the medical center cafeteria and my pager went off. It was the unit secretary, can you come up? The doctor's just left and the news is bad. And so I went up and went into Terry's room. There were 4 people in the room, the nurse, his divorced mother and father, and Terry. The other 3 were crying. Terry was stone-faced, stoic in bed. I sat down beside him. He said, well, the doctors say there's nothing else they can do. They're going to send me home. I guess just to die. And so Terry and I talked. We had further conversations. And finally he began to talk about God. And as he talked about God, the picture of God that emerged was of an angry, judgmental, vindictive God. It had much to do with the religious background with which Terry had grown up, the religious system in which he had been reared. He viewed God as an angry judge in the sky, almost frothing at the mouth to get a chance at Terry. I said to him, Terry, listen to what Scripture says about God. For God, the God that you're talking about, so loved the world that He gave His only Son, Terry, so that you could face Him in peace. But somehow Terry never could quite find it within himself to grasp that simple truth. A God who loved. He fought all the way to the end. And all the way to the end, as far as I, from my human perspective, could tell, there remained within him a fear of God. 17 years old. No future, but fear. The future both fascinates and frightens us. What is it to face the future? To be uncertain about a marriage, about a home, about a job? Have you found yourself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling after yet one more fight? There's nowhere to go from here, you've said. Do you find yourself sitting at the office, staring at a stack of papers, staring blankly at them, thinking, there is no way to go from here in this job, no place to turn? Do you find yourself staring at your checkbook and then at your bills and say, there's no way out, there's nothing that can be done? Or do you find yourself staring at yourself in the mirror with the words of the physician echoing and resonating in your ears? There is very limited time left. The sands in the hourglass of your life are almost through. So what's it like to face a future when you're uncertain about that future? As you know, in recent weeks, we have been meandering through the Gospels with Jesus, just trying to focus on Jesus, come to know Jesus better, come to know what it means that we are in relationship with Jesus. And we do the same today. We come, some of us with heavy hearts, concerned about the future. We come desirous of sitting in the presence of Jesus. Jesus, what do you do in my life when it comes to the future? Whether we be talking a global future of the entire planet or the future of that reality that is so pressing in my life right now. What do you do about the future? Well, I decided that we would have to look in the Gospels to find maybe the case, the instance, the experience where the future was the most severely compromised. Because if we know that He does something for the worst of us, then we can trust He'll do it for the rest of us. And so with that in mind, I invite you to take your Bibles to turn to the Gospel of Luke, Luke chapter 23. In your pew Bible, page 1573. We are going to join this scene in process. As we land here in Luke 23, we land right in the midst of a mob, a seething, surging, screaming lynch mob. The criminals stagger under the weight of the cross. The soldiers shout. The mob yells for blood. And right in the middle of it are the three objects of their anger. One in particular, according to the Roman government, two are thieves, one is an insurrectionist. And it is that insurrectionist from Nazareth that has the focus of most of the anger. The destination is Golgotha. The crosses are dragged on their way to the place of execution. It will be what happens when they arrive at that place of the skull that draws our attention. Luke chapter 23, I begin reading in verse 22. Luke records, 2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was written above him a notice which read, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said, "since you are under the same sentence. We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus answered him, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. And so there you have it. Thieves they were, both of them. There you have it. They are crucified, one at his right, one at his left. Jesus in the midst. And it is while they hang there suspended from those rough-hewn crosses that one of them begins to speak. It must have been hard to speak, maybe trying to push up on feet that were nailed to a block with all the searing pain that shot through their bodies. But for some reason, there was enough left in him that he wanted to say something. And when he did so, he opened up his mouth and echoed the jeering and the mocking of the crowd. So he said, aren't you the Messiah? Aren't you the one that they said was to come? If that is the case, why don't you save yourself and us in the process? Why don't you do something to prove you are who you are? The words are angry and bitter and filled with a mocking intonation. And then the other one speaks. He too speaks through a raspy voice. As much as he can do so, hanging on a cross, he turns to face his compatriot in crime. And he says to him, what are you saying? We're at least getting what we deserve. But him, he's done nothing wrong. So who is it that speaks? This second thief hanging on this second cross. Well, we know very little. We actually know almost nothing about him other than what is written here in the Gospels. But that hasn't kept people from telling the stories and the legends from growing. Listen from one commentary to what has been told about this thief. We don't know. Maybe it's based in truth, maybe not. Commentary writes, legend has been busy with the penitent thief. He is called variously Dismas, Demas, and Dumachus. One legend makes him a Judean Robin Hood who robbed the rich to give to the poor. The loveliest legend tells how the Holy Family were attacked by robbers when they fled with the child Jesus from Bethlehem to Egypt. According to that legend, Jesus was saved by the son of that robber band. The baby was so lovely that the young bandit could not bear to lay hands on him, but set him free, saying, "O most blessed of children, if there ever come a time for having mercy on me, then remember me and forget not this hour and this act." The robber youth, says the legend, who had saved Jesus as a baby, is the one who met him again on Calvary. And this time, it is Jesus who saved him. Well, there's no way to know of a certainty. But what we do know, according to the account, is that not only did he rebuke his friend, but he also then turned to Jesus, and in a voice that must have been with a plaintive plea for pity, turned to Jesus and said to him, "Jesus, remember me. Remember me. When you come into your kingdom, remember me." It's a very strange thing to ask, because everywhere the eye of Jesus might have turned, it fell upon markers that would to us have said failure. Defeat was in the air that day at Golgotha. With that crown that was smashed down into his temples and the blood that flowed was written defeat. With the rough-hewn cross upon which he hung was written defeat. With the mocking, jeering crowd was written defeat. With the disciples who abandoned him, trying to save their own skin, was written defeat. With the betrayal, with the denial, everywhere Jesus looked was written defeat. And then, right in the midst of all of this defeat, One person. A young man with no future says, Jesus, remember me. And Jesus responds. He has heard mocking and jeering and insults for 18 to 24 hours. And then one voice, remember me on the day of your coronation. Remember that I hung by your side. Remember that I longed for your touch. Remember that I yearned for your peace. Remember me. And Jesus says to him, today, today. Why does he say today? He gives him the promise, you will be with me in paradise. In other words, you will be a member of my kingdom. But why does he say to him today? He has, after all, no future. He has nothing to bring, nothing to give. If ever there was one about whom the song could have been sung, in my hand no price I bring, simply to thy cross I cling. If ever one could have sung that, it was this man. He had no future. Well, a few hours. A few hours rasping with the rattle of death in his throat. A few hours. But no future. And Jesus says today. Understand what Jesus is saying. He is saying to him today, you, as you look around the scene of this mob screaming for my life today, when you hear them mocking me as Messiah today, when defeat is written on every hand today, you are asking about my kingdom today, on this day, when everything is lost. Well, let me tell you something. If today, when everything is lost, when there is no future, you can still ask me to remember you in the future, then I promise you something. If you can hang in the midst of crosses and still believe in a crown, if you can hang in the midst of death and still believe in life, if you can hang in the midst of defeat and still believe in victory, if you can hang in the midst of everything being lost and no future being left, and still talk to me as though I were a king, then today I give you that guarantee. You will be in my kingdom. You have a future ahead of you, the likes of which you cannot imagine. That's what Jesus says. I want you to listen to the words of William Barclay as he writes about this story. He says, surely this story tells us above all, that it is never too late to turn to Christ. There are other things of which we must say, the time is past, I'm grown too old now. But we can never say that about turning to Christ. So long as the human heart beats, the invitation of Christ still stands. As the poet wrote of the man who was killed, as he was thrown from his galloping horse, betwixt the stirrup and the ground, mercy I asked, mercy I found. And so Barclay says it is literally true that while there is life, there is hope. So I don't know what brought you in this morning, what you carried in, what burden you are bearing, what uncertainty there is about your future, how fascinated you might have been, but how fearful you now are. But I can tell you this. I can summarize the story of Jesus and the penitent thief in one simple sentence. Jesus wants what's left. Jesus wants what's left, whatever is left. If there are only shards left of the beautiful picture window that was your life, Jesus wants what's left. If there is nothing left of your marriage, He wants that. If there seems to be nothing left of your life, physical or economic, He wants that at a time when there seems nothing left for on this planet. He wants what's left. Because to those whose future has been severely compromised or curtailed, Jesus will take what's left and He will offer you a future you cannot comprehend. Maybe it's because of that I am so drawn to the words of that prayer, a prayer that was written by Thomas Merton. In his book, Thoughts on Solitude, Merton writes what has become known as the Merton Prayer. My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself and the fact of whether I am following your will is really happening. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore I will trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will fear no evil, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone. He wants what's left. He has a future for you. And because of that, there was another friend of Jesus who, when he faced a compromised, shortened future, because of the grace of Jesus in his life and because of the confidence that Jesus inspired, could stand there facing the chill, cold wind of eternity and say, "For I am ready to be poured out, and the time of my departure is at hand. But I have fought the good fight, I have finished my course, and I have kept the faith."
Thank you for watching the Discover channel. This channel's primary focus is to share uplifting and enriching spiritual content with people of all backgrounds of life. These presentations will enhance and develop you intellectually so that you can make informed decisions that will assist you in your day-to-day life. Our goal is to bring hope to the viewers and encourage them. Should you share this vision, please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your family and friends so that they too can benefit from this content. We have a Patreon account should you wish to support this channel so that we can produce more of this content. Books and merchandise will also become available as the channel grows. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll see you at the next one.